part of being a thought leader is having expertise. And so there might need to be some foundational work done. Figure out an area that you want to focus in and dive into the research, dive into other thought leaders, and pull out bits and pieces of what you learned from those people and start to become an expert in your own right. And at first, you can start off as a content creator where you're sharing your thoughts on what someone else said. And eventually you're going to build your brand up to be known as, oh, this person talks about this.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the D4 Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Ms. Teegan Bartos. Teegan is a highly respected award-winning resume writer and a top job search expert. She is a familiar face to those who are looking for job search guidance, offering a wealth of knowledge and expertise to her services. Today we'll be talking more about thought leadership and how it helps us to stand out in the job market. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Teegan, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yes, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Great. Thank you so much. So my first question. So, what is thought leadership, and why is it important for professionals to establish themselves as thought leaders in their field?
So there's so many different definitions of thought leadership. A lot of times people will say a thought leader is an expert, but I think that to be considered a true thought leader, you have to be more than just an expert in your field. You have to be an influencer. You have to have the ability to get people to think about things in new ways and influence people in your industry for what comes next. And so I think it's important. Well, let me go back for a second. I don't think everybody's meant to be a thought leader. You know, if you're the type of professional who's on the forefront of innovation and has new ideas and likes to question the status quo, then being a thought leader might be the right thing for you to do. And that's because, you know, you've got the expertise, you've got the knowledge, you've got the credibility, but you can also think outside the box. And the tricky part is you're also willing to take a stand, which not everybody is willing to do. Like take AI, for example. People definitely have to take a stand on where the ethical boundaries at, how you use it, or data, for example, what crosses the line, and when it comes to people's privacy, or what's ethical or what's unethical. So you can use thought leadership for lots of different ways, and people who are willing to be a thought leader have to come really close to that line of pushing things to the edge a little bit, not in a good or bad way, just in a way that I'm willing to say the things that other people in my industry aren't willing to say. And that can be a little risky for some people.
Right. Yeah. So, how can professionals identify their areas of expertise and build their professional brand as a thought leader?
So there's so many ways to really identify yourself as a thought leader. And the first one is, you know, really getting that brand recognition. And so if you are deciding, okay, I want to catapult my career by being recognized as a thought leader, I want to recession proof my job. So that way, should something ever happen to me, I am so well known in my industry, I'm so highly sought after, I don't have to worry about the economy or the state of the job market. And ways to do that as a content creator. So in thought leadership, you have to get your thoughts out. So you have to be creating content in some way. And so before you just start pushing publish, you want to have a strategy. So I think it's really important for people to define their goals. What is it that you want to take a stand on? What topic, what niche? And then review other thought leaders in that space. Right now, the market feels so oversaturated with experts, but there's very few true thought leaders. And so the ones who are, take a look at what they're talking about, what kind of stands do they take, and see if you have an interesting perspective that you can add to that space. And then once you've done that, you can really identify your area of focus. So that way you can start creating content and deciding where you want to publish it. Do you want to have a podcast like yourself? Do you want to be on LinkedIn like me? YouTube, Twitter? I mean, there's so many different platforms for people to get their voice out. So you need to decide what's your strategy. Where are people in your industry living or gaining exposure? That may be TEDx's, white papers, etc. And then something that I think a lot of people miss is measuring results. And so if you are going to take the time to put your expertise out there, how many people are you impacting? Because that's part of thought leadership, is influencing other people. And so you're sharing your knowledge, helping others build their area of expertise, making it easy and exciting for people to learn, and really helping people figure out the right questions to ask to really drive the needle in your industry. And so sometimes it can be difficult to measure results, but think about it. How often are you getting great feedback in comments? What type of guests are you able to attract based on the type of questions you ask and the conversations you have? So those are kind of like the steps to starting off becoming a thought leader in your space.
Great insights. So, so in this regard, what are some of the strategies for sharing insights and ideas with others and building a following as a thought leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live on LinkedIn. That's where all of my content goes. And I have found that on LinkedIn, a fantastic way is to actually engage with other thought leaders. And so when you get involved in conversations with other people who have bold statements and really strong expertise in their niche, you can have a different level of conversation with them than you can have with someone else. And so when you get involved with other thought leaders and start collaborating with them, if it's being a guest on their podcast or engaging in the comments or even having a conversation behind the scenes, not necessarily on a public social media site, you start to earn the respect of other thought leaders, and you begin to collaborate with one another, engage with one another. And then something else that's really important is when you do start publishing your own thoughts, not just responding to other people's thoughts, is when people engage with your thoughts, you want to respond back to them. And so when you are talking about something, always have a call to action. Get people involved in the conversation, challenge them, and then give them feedback on whatever it is. So, maybe it's sharing the top business book of 2023, right? And then people are sharing what they think and why. And then you give them feedback on, oh, I'm going to have to check that book out. That's not what I've heard of yet. Or, oh, yes, I absolutely love this author. I really like the point on here. And then try to dig for deeper conversations, because it shows the depth of expertise in your willingness to teach. And that's another aspect of being a thought leader that is really strong, is your generosity on helping others elevate where they're at in the industry.
Right. So, over to my next question. So, what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid when building a thought leadership brand?
So, one of the downsides of taking a stand is not everybody's going to agree with you. But that doesn't mean you want to avoid it. It just means you want to have tact in the way that you handle it. And so everyone is deserving of having their own opinion, and you can respectfully disagree. And so one of the pitfalls that I think is really important for people to avoid is having immature conversations and remaining to have tact and professionalism at all times. You can still take a bold stand without being disrespectful. And that's where some people go wrong at is they can become combative instead of staying supportive.
Okay, okay, got it. So, so how can professionals leverage this thought leadership brand to open up some of the career possibilities and like their future prompts actually?
So once you start establishing your brand and getting recognized in your industry for having that thought leadership, you're going to probably immediately be tapped to those closest to you for stretch assignments. That might be getting a promotion at work. That might be working with a more challenging client or having a special project that you're working on or being able to launch something. But then from there, your sphere of influence grows and you start to get invited to speak at national conferences, to get articles published in respected publications. You end up getting on bigger podcasts. Sometimes the news will ask you to come on and be a subject matter expert for whatever program that they're putting on. And that can be really powerful for your career because people like to hire people and work with people that they know, like, and trust. And so if people recognize your face, your name, and your topic, then they feel like they can go to you or want to be associated with you because your brand only elevates whatever it is that they're doing.
Right, right, fair. So, in this era, it's very hard to become more authentic in the way like we produce contents or like to actually build a particular brand. So, like as a thought leader, like how do we balance the need to be authentic and transparent, like to become a successful thought leader, and how can we protect our reputation in the personal branding space?
I really like this question because authenticity can sometimes be an excuse to not have a filter, but authenticity can also be an excuse to live in a bubble. And so, what I challenge people to do is to really understand who they are and what drives. Okay, so authenticity, when you're thinking about authenticity, it can be really challenging to be authentic because very few people actually know who they are. So I really try to challenge people to dig deep. What drives you? If you're an expert in a field, that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because you spent the time and were dedicated enough and disciplined enough to become an expert in this area. And so when you think back about why did I get started in this? What drives me to this? What keeps me going every day? And why is it that I find it so important to take a stand on this topic? Then you can stay true to who you are and who your voice is. And so, myself, I have a very casual way of communicating. I want to make sure that everyone feels like they can understand what I'm saying. Where my brother in law, he's an economist, and I don't understand what he says half the time. And that's just his way of communicating. And so, if you can stay true to who you are, what your voice is, it's a lot easier to stay authentic because there's something that a lot of people call the shiny thing syndrome, where maybe you try to sound like someone you admire, or maybe you pivot your strategy because that's what's happening right now. But if you stay focused to what your overarching goal that you defined was, and what your area of expertise is, and your focus on that part is, then it's easier to not get distracted because that's what happens a lot of times. We can get distracted from what the original goal is, what the original agenda is. And we evolve in our careers and in our expertise, but we can still do so in a way that stays true to who we are and helps empower other people to do that as well. Because part of being a thought leader isn't getting everybody to be like you, it's to get other people to have an elevated way of their thinking, because we all know diversity of thought is so important.
So over to my next question again. So, how do we handle criticism or pushback when sharing our insights and ideas as a thought leader?
Well, once you start getting trolls or once people start, having some criticism, that's when you know you've made it. That's when you know you are having a topic that is worth talking about. And there's always going to be critics out there. And if you're coming from an educated place, you can handle criticism by saying, hey, thanks for sharing that alternative view. Or you can share your sources on the research that you've personally conducted or have been a part of. And sometimes it's a good thing to find out that you may have missed the mark on something. But I think oftentimes thought leaders typically are sharing content on areas that they know really, really well and feel confident on speaking on. So a lot of times when criticism does happen, it's typically people you just end up ignoring or quickly passing over and not spending too much thought on, because at the end of the day, if you truly believe in what you're putting out there, then it doesn't matter what someone else says about it.
Right, makes sense. So, yeah, so how do we effectively navigate the line between sharing our own insights or ideas or building from others' particular thoughts or something like that?
Kind of how I had mentioned earlier, where how to expand your reach as a thought leader is collaborating with other thought leaders. And so you want to promote other thought leaders as a thought leader and continue the conversation and build off of what someone else is talking about. And so there's so many complexities in different industries that if one person and content typically is micro. And so they're only touching on a small piece of that topic because otherwise consumers aren't going to absorb it, because our attention spans are so small. And so if you build upon what that person had started, it only builds to your credibility, because here's this other thought leader giving you a platform to expand the thought and sharing your insight. And so I think it's a really strong strategy to share other people's work and build upon it, and sharing original thoughts, and starting your own conversations yourself.
Understood. So over to the other aspects of building a thought leadership brand. So like the importance of social media and how effectively we use them. So like how can we effectively channelize social media and other online platforms to build and promote the social brand?
I think it has to deal with how busy you are and if you're going to invest in a team to support you. Because if you're at a certain level of thought leadership, you're going to have a whole entire marketing team that's going to be able to manage different channels. But if you're doing it yourself, I would say start with one channel and master that channel. Understand the best time to post. Understand what hashtags to use. Get your SEO optimization down. Figure out if short content, long content, videos, etc., what performs best for you, and take note and measure the performance metrics so you can make sure that you're really reaching your target audience. Because some audiences really run to video content, and some audiences would much rather have a short piece of content. And so when it comes to social media, focus on one place first, build that up, and then expand from there. And if you get to the point where you are having a team supporting you, that's great. but you don't want to lose your authentic voice if other people are starting to take over. And so making sure that there's strict guidelines on how your marketing team is responding to comments, how collaborations are being initiated, so you don't lose that piece of you.
Understood. Understood. Yeah. So one of the important aspect which I wanted to touch upon. So like, oftentimes I get this particular question from folks or my friends. So like, how do we build a thought leadership brand if we are not in a traditional leadership role and we do not have experience in that field, or we don't have that kind of an environment to actually bring about this particular thing to life? So like, how can someone actually transition to that particular role if all the environment is actually not favoring them?
Well, part of being a thought leader is having expertise. And so there might need to be some foundational work done. Figure out an area that you want to focus in and dive into the research, dive into other thought leaders, and pull out bits and pieces of what you learn from those people and start to become an expert in your own right. And at first, you can start off as a content creator where you're sharing your thoughts on what someone else said. And eventually, you're going to build your brand up to be known as, oh, this person talks about this. So in my business, for example, I work with boot camps. One of them is a DevOps boot camp. These are people from transitioning from the military, accountants, artists. I mean, nothing dealing with tech at all. And they go through this 6-month program. And throughout the 6-month program, they're sharing what they're learning. Hey, this is my day one. I'm just starting off in my boot camp, and this is what I'm diving in today. And then the second week, I started my first project in Linux and going through that all the way through their journey in learning Python and how tricky that is, and how, they spent 5 hours just to realize they had the semicolon in the wrong place. And thought leaders in the space get a giggle out of it because people who truly understand Python know if you don't know it well, it can get really screwed up. And then people will start sharing tips and tricks, and you become known as someone who's likable and someone who's learning and someone who's willing to share your learning journey with others. And so that's building a strong foundation of being a creator. And then the more time you spend in that space and the more you invest in your own education and sharing that education with others, you begin to, over time, develop that thought leadership. And that is a beautiful thing because that means nothing can stop anyone from becoming a thought leader eventually.
Great insights actually, and I really like that part. And this is pretty important for everyone to kind of understand, and for like maybe this will be the most important bit on this particular podcast. So so over to the aspect of communication, and which is very crucial and in this particular space. So like, how can we use speaking engagements, writing, and other forms of content creation to share our thoughts, and how we can enhance this particular skill set over the period of time?
Well, just like in anything else, to enhance it, you invest in it. You continue to do it, because one of the best ways to get better is just to keep doing it. And so there's going to be strategies when you're doing presentations or when you're creating content, like on LinkedIn, for example, where I'm writing posts. You want that strong hook to make someone want to stop scrolling and press see more and actually read it. And then you want to have a call to action at the end of it to get that engagement. And so whatever platform you choose to be your platform, on YouTube, for example, there's different metrics out there that say, okay, you want your intro to be less than 10 seconds and you want the video to be shorter than 3 minutes or whatever it is for YouTube. So once you pick your platform where you think that your audience really lives and you're going to get the most reach, then do the research because it's out there on what performs best and then implement that and then play with it, because then you can figure out how to improve. And just over time, your writing gets more creative, gets more engaging, your ability to communicate gets stronger. And there's so many different coaches or YouTube channels or blogs that help you develop in those skills. I have a speech impediment. I do not like public speaking. Up until 2 years ago, I would never go on a podcast because I would just be sweating because I was so nervous. And I realized, yes, there's times where I stumble over my words or I forget what I was just talking about, but it shows the human aspect of me, and people can resonate with that and people can feel empowered by that. Well, if she doesn't have to be perfect, I don't have to be perfect either. Let me give this a go. And the more you can make people comfortable and the more you can make people feel you without knowing you, the stronger your brand is going to be. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it, but there's also a lot of vulnerability when it comes to your own emotional intelligence and what you're willing to invest in your development and your dedication to this. That can impact how successful you are.
Right, right. Yeah. So my next question was on the tracking and monitoring. So you did touch upon how we can actually like track some of the essential bits in when we are actually creating some content for our personal brand. But like, how can we measure the success of our thought leadership? And is there any some kind of like tracking which we can actually internally do to assess ourselves?
There's a lot of metrics and dashboards that are built into every single platform. So you can check your analytics and, likes and comments are great. But for me and for the topic of thought leadership, it's more difficult to measure your true impact, because a part of being thought leadership is you empowering others to be better leaders themselves, to ask better questions, to get more curious about the topic that you're taking a bold stand on. For me, I'm in the career space. And so I do a lot of recruitment and retention trainings, emerging leadership trainings. So how do I measure the success in that? Was I able to influence my audience enough for them to take action? Did they implement the strategies that I recommended into the recruitment and TA practices? Did they, when I'm working with job seekers, did the job seeker take the suggestions and the strategies and implement them? And not only did they implement them, did they then find success? And so sometimes for me personally, my measure of success is my audience's success. So measuring success can get a little tricky. The easiest way to do it is just look at your analytics. Every platform has analytics for you to see how you're doing engagement wise. But the deeper level of success is your impact that you're having in your industry.
Right, right. I also felt the importance of monitoring our connections list as actually like, and so the way, like, let's take LinkedIn for example. So the when we are growing our channel, or like when we are growing our network, like more and more people will get connected, and a lot of what to say,
Yes.
the numbers will definitely change, and the quality conversation are also like the conversation style itself will change actually. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Because when you're a thought leader, you're having influence on your industry. So the more people in the industry that you're drawing yourself into means you're doing something right.
Right, right. There is something which I noticed actually. I don't know whether it is a right tracking mechanism. In LinkedIn, there is something called LinkedIn Social Selling Index.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it, so that score, is it actually making any sense according to you?
So that score is a very good selling move on LinkedIn's part. Essentially, it's one of their funnels to get you into Sales Navigator, but the social index is still important because it measures how often you post, your engagement on those posts, and it also measures your DM activity. And so, are people willing to take the conversations privately with you, not just publicly with you? How are you getting new connections and new followers? And so, the social index, mine's high because I have so many private conversations and public conversations. It's just a way that I invest my time. I probably spend 1 to 2 hours a day on LinkedIn. I average 100 to 250 DMs a day during the week. And so because I have so many different LinkedIn lives, LinkedIn audio rooms, I engage with other thought leaders on the platform. And so it can tell you what areas that you may need to improve upon to elevate your strategy. Because when you're first starting to become a creator, to get to that point where you're recognized as a thought leader, it can be overwhelming and you have to start somewhere. So as you're working your way through this, getting your score is a perfect way to identify where you can be spending a little bit more time to have a greater impact.
Right, right. So now I feel accomplished actually, because I think mine got into your 150th list and you actually noticed it. So that's a big win for me.
Awesome.
Right. So over to the last question actually. So regarding building confidence. So like, how do we deal with the fear of failure or rejection when building a thought leadership brand?
Yeah. It When you care so deeply about a topic that you're willing to spend time talking about it, there is an emotional tie to it. And so it can feel at times, so like for example, there on Tuesday this week, the top LinkedIn experts, according to Teal, came out and they classified people into different thought leadership areas: resume writing and LinkedIn, etc. And the area that I was recognized was
Very
self-paced,
right.
uh,
I
self-paced
think
resources.
career top career coaches, right? I think that was
Yeah,
the
career
yeah,
coaches. And
yeah,
that's the space that I'm in.
right.
And so there was only so many people picked, which means so many people were left out. And so when when you're recognized, it feels amazing. But the topic that I got recognized for, I was like, oh, I just started doing this. I am so much stronger in this other category. And I had to humble myself because to be recognized at all is an honor. And I was honored. I was actually blown away to be recognized in that category because I have only been focused on self-paced resources in the past couple of years to make sure there's affordable resources for everyone. And then I sat back and thought, I had a couple of conversations with other people who were really disappointed to not be recognized. And so I think it's okay to feel disappointed when you don't get called to center stage for something that you care so passionately for, or when someone else misrepresents your brand. And so if someone was to recognize me as a recruiter, that's not how I want to be known. Am I a recruiter? Yes, I do confidential executive search for search firms, but I don't want to be known as a recruiter. I want to be known as a career coach. And so there's moments where you just have to sit with yourself and eat a piece of humble pie and recognize that you just have to keep moving forward. And there's going to be times where you publish something and it gets nothing. There's crickets. And so you just start working on your strategy again. Well, where am I going wrong? Start to troubleshoot just like you would in anything else. Have I been engaging on other people's posts recently? Have I been keeping up with my connection requests? The algorithm, if you go on vacation and don't post for a week, your algorithm tanks. And so when I went on vacation, I was gone for a week and my engagement had went down 80%. And you just have to shake those things off because you build it right back up. So I try personally to not take things too personal and to remember that tomorrow's another day. But I do understand why people can get so distraught. And one of the things that if you are going to be a thought leader, you do have to have tough skin. You have to really believe in yourself, really know yourself, really love yourself to be able to deal with what being a creator brings you, because there's going to be terrible things said about you. I have a girlfriend, Sonal Ball, who people came after her accent. She's Indian. She lives in Holland. She's traveled all over the world as a HR leader. And it was just, why would someone do that? And I have another girlfriend who's in this space and she gained weight. And people said, whoa, you've gained so much weight. And it's just insecure people will, when you're have an audience, will come after incredibly shallow and disrespectful and unprofessional areas that you're presenting yourself in. And so you have to have tough skin, and it's okay to get upset by it, but you can't let it consume you. Otherwise, this might not be the right path for you because it's always going to be out there. That's just human nature.
Right. I think we need to develop that power of we need to have that tendency to ignore certain things, because what I also understood from my career or my path is that, like, certain conversations, I think we need to give that hard stop at times. So what
I
we
think
actually
that we have to stop being so offended and being willing to listen and see other people's perspectives. We don't have to agree with them.
Right.
But giving someone the opportunity to express their point of view and being mature enough to communicate through whatever controversy or discourse there is a really healthy thing for us to do that moves the needle forward. And in a society where things are so heightened with polarizing times, it can be challenging because you don't, even if you take that stand, the person on the other side of the screen may not always do that. And then sometimes you just need to have to walk away. And you know that you represented yourself in the best light that you could. And that's why it's really important to cultivate a tribe of strong people around you, because when someone does something inappropriate or says something inappropriate or is just totally off base, there can be other people who are going to want to say, actually, that's not how this works. In my industry, the ATS, applicant tracking system, it's an algorithm. It parses information from the resume into the candidate profile. Your application gets locked in one part for federal compliance, and your candidate profile is what gets passed along. It's not scary, but people who have never worked on it, or worked on it 40 years ago and haven't seen the recent technology, they might be speaking on something from the past. And then other people who are in the space presently can say, actually, no, I would love to have a conversation with you and show you this technology now, some of the user features. And so that is one of the benefits of having a strong following, is that when there is some type of troll, let's call it, people will also want to speak up to it because they're trying to gain their thought leadership and be viewed as an expert. And if you can say, nope, I've got a screenshot, here's exactly how it looks, then it's hard to argue with that.
Right. Well said, actually. So yeah, so that covered all my questions for today, Tegan, and thank you so much for shedding light on this important aspect and sharing your experience and line of thoughts in this topic. And really, really appreciate your insights on this. So thank you so much, Tegan.
Yes, thanks for having me.